Glad to be back here with Sam Heshmati and Roberto Rivera of the other big prestigious institution among Silicon Valley money people that ran into some problems last year. And so I'd like to start out again with kind of what, so First Republic had a different kind of time frame, obviously, than the SVB failure. But when SVB went down, what was your first experience of that on that Thursday, Friday?
Yeah. Well, look, funny enough, we were at our annual sales conference, so we had pretty much all the front client-facing folks across the entire bank together at one time. And Roberto and I, it's a moment in time I think we'll never forget when the news broke of SVB.
And you were there together, the two of you?
We were there together, yeah, we were. And look, just for background, I spent 8 years at SVB, started my career there before joining First Republic to launch the innovation practice there. So knew SVB really well, and I think initially it was a rush of emotion because you're like, what the hell is going on here right now? And you start to think about former colleagues and how everybody's being impacted, and then our phones started to ring. You can almost feel the room, everybody looking down at their phone, basically folks calling and saying, hey, we need to get a bank account set up as quickly as we possibly can. So I think the initial response was all hands on deck. How do we serve as an option for a lot of folks that are concerned about SVB being able to potentially have another home with us really quickly as well?
Yeah, and I'd say I immediately felt the concern just because there was so much panic, and I think everybody in this room probably lived that weekend. And the first thing I told our team was, like, we don't sell fear, right? We don't sell into the hype. Like, the media's doing that. Like, calm people down, calm down companies, entrepreneurs, personal clients, tell them that we're here as a resource and we can help. But it was sort of all hands on deck, and I still get goosebumps talking about that weekend. But I mean, we must have opened like a few thousand accounts in anticipation. I think a lot of people don't realize that. Maybe some of the people in this room do, but a lot of people were opening accounts at First Republic and thinking that that was a safe option. And then in a course of 24 hours, that narrative started to change, just based on all the news that was out there.
Yeah, so when did that change? So when did you go from like, oh my gosh, we have to race around and open up new accounts for people to like, oh no, maybe we're going down too?
Friday. So I remember vividly having a conversation with our executive team saying, we're having a lot of inbound questions and people started to question First Republic, which was a completely novel concept. First Republic had been, more diversified, right? We were known more as a private bank that had been growing this corporate infrastructure to serve, the innovation economy and venture and private equity, but we weren't SVB, right? And so pretty much 24 hours, I'd say, people started saying, hey, what does First Republic's balance sheet look like? How are you guys different? To which we had, a lot of answers, right? We were, again, not diversified into solely, venture or innovation or private equity. We had more consumer households. The deposit mix was different. We hadn't gone long treasuries. I mean, it was just a fundamentally different balance sheet.
Mm-hmm. And so then it was sort of a month or so, right, where things kind of ground along and ground down. I mean, at what point did you say, okay, we got to get out of here?
Well, look, it's funny because I can speak for myself. I actually wasn't thinking about getting out of there. For me, there were so many ups and downs along the way where we thought it was going to work out. I mean, I think that's the tough part of it for us. It was literally a roller coaster, and we wanted to see it through the end. We wanted to be super careful not to just jump ship and hurry up and find another home, to the point where when we went into receivership, we even tried to see if there was a path forward for, I say myself and my team. We looked at it and said, okay, can this work here as well? Because we understand that the least disruptive thing is what's there. All of our clients were on the platform already, so we're like, okay, if we can make this work, now that's a whole other, situation.
Yeah, why didn't that work?
Look, I'll speak for myself. I've been doing this for 22 years or so now, and over the last 11, 12 years at First Republic, we had built a unique offering, I think, with respect to working with founders as individuals and helping them on the company side and the venture community as well. It just was so unique in our approach that it was hard to replicate. And I wasn't willing to carve out bits and pieces of what I did. It just basically wanted to continue to do 100% of the same work we had been doing over the previous decade to support this, the innovation economy.
I had spent 17 years at First Republic. I actually started as a college intern, so I was in no hurry to leave either, right? I think we were all trying to see it through the end. You know, it had a strong culture. A lot of people had worked there a long time. You know, we enjoyed working with the clients we had. I think, you know, to Sam's point, it wasn't so much that anybody was in a rush to leave as much as, you know, we fundamentally believe in relationship banking. I know that's been tossed around a lot, but, you know, for us, it wasn't just a single product, right? Whether it was, you know, the banking or the wealth or, you know, debt, whatever it was more the platform, the holistic platform that allowed us to serve and be effective, right? Nobody wants to go out and be on a platform where they can't be as effective. And I think that was probably the biggest driving factor for me.
And so at Citizens Bank, you're Citizens Private Bank, right? I mean, that is not,
To be clear, not
something-
First Citizens. It's
right,
different
not First Citizen. And private bank, you know, private bank connotes something slightly different than the full suite of services that you're talking about, you know, both serving individuals and the companies and, you know, venture debt and all those things. I mean, how do you do that, all those things within a private bank?
So we tend to, it's more of a relationship bank, right? And the private bank is more of a marketing feature, if you will, of the product or the platform. But it's really bringing that holistic banking experience to the end user, to the clients, right? And, you know, within our group, we're doing, you know, emerging manager, venture, private equity, innovation. We're doing entrepreneur, high net worth individuals. And it's this whole concept that to really have a deep relationship and to drive, you know, value for both sides, it makes sense to have it sort of self-contained, right? I think a lot of banks are organized for good reasons, very segmented, right? Commercial banking in one group, personal consumer banking in another, you know, small business banking in others. But what happens when you're trying to drive relationships in that is that there's a lot of cooks in the kitchen, right? Mm-hmm. And so for us, the concept of private banking is less so about just consumers or individuals, but more along the lines of you have a dedicated team, a dedicated person who is there to serve the, you know, the various needs and quarterback for you. And that was, frankly, First Republic's biggest ad. That was our strongest sort of core competency, is we had relationships really well centralized, so people didn't have to go tell their story 10 different times, right? We worked with entrepreneurs. You know, Sam worked with somebody at inception of their company, you know, and they didn't have to go tell that story 10 times about who they were, why they did it, right? We kind of knew their background, and it made it easier to offer different services to them in the future.
So is that concept of relationship banking, I mean, as you noted, that came up this morning, and there's a, you know, one point of view which says that that's kind of an old model and things aren't going to work that way anymore, basically.
It's not. Look, one, I've been hearing relationship banking for my entire career, and it's really, really difficult to execute. And until I had joined First Republic, I actually didn't realize how nuanced it was with respect, and the model oftentimes has a lot to do with it. Look, there's a lot of different types of offerings. There's fintechs, there's smaller banks, larger banks. You know, the challenge is, how do you capture everything that's important to a founder? So yes, user interface, things like that are important, but there's also a long-term relationship and a life cycle that every company has to think about. You're not choosing a bank for a year or two. You're choosing a bank for the next decade. You don't want to change banks. And if I was to ask how many people are excited about changing a bank in this room, I'm not going to get anybody raising their hand. So you have to build a platform that can support at inception all the way towards whatever event may happen personally on the commercial side. And I think there's groups out there, different profiles, that are really good at doing bits and pieces of it. The challenge is, how do you attack all of it? And so most folks we talk to say, yes, of course we want amazing technology, but we also want to be able to pick up the phone and talk to somebody when something goes wrong. We also want to pick up the phone when we're buying our first home and talk to somebody who's not running the information through some software and getting a yes and a no. It's somebody that's sitting down to try to understand who I am and try to support me. You can't do that if it's all technology built, right? Because there's qualitative things that are just difficult to capture as part of looking at any given individual.
Right. And so how do you persuade people that you are that entity that's going to give them all this? You know, it's not a well-known brand here. I mean, it's one thing to be First Republic, which has been around, and probably maybe your dad banked there, you know, but this is a kind of a new entity, and you're saying, well, you know, you need to trust us with all this stuff.
So one of the benefits we had that, you know, over time, or since the acquisition happened, we've had over 200 people from First Republic join Citizens in various levels, and mostly within the private bank, but also in other parts of it. So it's really the people, it's the relationships, right? And we keep doubling down on that. But people will join and have been joining. We've crossed over $2 billion of deposits gathered just since we launched in October. So there's market validation right there. But it's about the people, and it's about people knowing what we're about, and the fact that we didn't just make this decision because it was lucrative or because we wanted a place to go. Like, we took the time to vet nearly every name you can think of in terms of where did we want to go, where was the best place for not just us, but for our business, right? For the clients and relationships that we've invested so much time into.
Yeah, there was a lot of inbound interest, as you can imagine. A lot of folks want to get into this business, and spoke to most of the banks you're all familiar with, even some that are here, right? And we looked at it, and there's a couple things. One is, for us, it was important when you say, why do we believe we're the bank? So we just came out of a very turmoil-driven kind of year, right? Banks went down. So we underwrote to banks differently too. You have to understand the strength and stability of a bank. Citizens, 70% insured deposits, right? Very different than FRB and SVB, where it was, I think, the inverse in a lot of ways, right? And so we looked at, okay, if we were looking at the worst case situation, are we a bank that will be able to weather the storm? So that was number one, is it a safe place to go? And as I see a lot of folks choosing banks, I always say, look under the hood, find out what's sitting behind.
Is it, someone brought up earlier, investment grade, is Citizens the parent and investment grade?
Oh, yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we look at that, and then the other thing is the model. How do they allow us to do what we want? Citizens Private Bank didn't exist. Citizens as a platform existed, and it's not a new bank. It's a 200-year-old bank that is the 12th largest bank in the country now. But their key thing with bringing us in is, how do we bring you in, plug you into what we're doing, but still give you the flexibility to bring what the magic was at First Republic. So they created an entire new private bank within the Citizens umbrella that is adopting 100% of what our model was. So I think the whole idea here is, we see so much disruption that we want to bring that one familiar option back to market, because everything else looks so different outside of the jersey. And you see the name of the session here, it's driven by the same people.
And we'll have time just for one question if anyone has a question. Yeah, Stuart?
Well,
yeah, to summarize that question, how do you compete with JP Morgan for Stuart's business?
Well, one, and I'll hand it to you, I'll just say is, we're sitting on this stage for a reason right now, okay? And we can't speak to what another bank is gonna do. We can speak to what we found important to us to be able to continue to do, and where we felt the highest probability of being able to do it is at.
And one final, just very quick question. What's the biggest surprise you've had since October in the new business? What has been different than you expected?
Biggest surprise? I'd say you come in hopeful. You are generally, anytime you're being courted or pitched or anything to join anything, you never know how it's going to play out. Pleasant surprises, the energy around the room. There's existing businesses that needed to be leveraged to help launch an entire new private bank. And as Roberto said, we've crossed $2 billion now or so to date. And so that doesn't happen without all hands on deck beyond the private bank, going to the broader platform. And I'd say pleasantly surprised, hoped for it, but very pleasantly surprised with the amount of energy across the entire enterprise. There's so much buy-in in what it is that we're doing that I think leaves us all feeling like we made the right decision.
Roberto, any last comment?
No, I mean, I'll go back to the JP Morgan Chase comment, which is I think they will certainly keep business. I think we're not naive to that. I think, and there's been some of this theme woven in from other people, but I think right now it may not seem like the client, the end user, the consumer, is better off than a year ago, but I fundamentally believe, give it a couple years or maybe even a year, less than that, 18, 24 months, I think there will be better competition. Like, we're all raising each other's game. And so I think if they want to keep more of it, they're going to have to do better, right? Just like any other bank, just like we will, right? If we want to acquire clients, we're going to have a better value add, right? A better value proposition to the end user. So I think maybe not right now. It doesn't feel like there's, this ecosystem, this region has it better off than they did a year ago, but I think it's going to be better long term for sure.
All right, well, on that sunny note, we'll move on to the next one. Thank you very much.
Thank you for having us.